Hello and welcome to the Esports Biz Show. I'm your host, Justin Jacobson. This week we'll be discussing college esports. Just a disclaimer, nothing here is intended as legal advice, so all the information is for educational purposes only. This week's guest is Jacob. He's the CEO and commissioner of NECC. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure, my friend. I'm thrilled to be here. Looking forward to the conversation.
It's an honor to have you. So to start, please introduce yourself. Tell us a little about your past gaming experience and what was the first game you played?
Yeah, this is where I'm gonna disappoint people. I come from the traditional world of sports. It's been the last game I played was probably NHL '94 in my freshman dorm room at Colgate University.
That was a great one. That had the ultimate goal trick. We go to the boards and came back.
Right, up and down.
That was when you had to outlaw moves in video games.
Right. That's right. Yeah, no, it's been a while, but obviously, Jacob and Ryan, I've been in this world now for just shy of 5 years, and it's really been cool to be a part of. It's really been cool to see the growth, and certainly, be a part of it at a level where Justin I never thought I would be, quite frankly.
Amazing. So, how'd you first get involved in the college esports space, and why?
Yeah, so originally I was the commissioner of a Division III athletic conference, and some of the presidents wanted to. They had esports programs on their campuses to varying degrees. Some were really fully invested and had really high level programs, scholarship dollars, even a curriculum based approach to gaming. And others were very casual, right? Sort of recreational clubs. And they said, we want to sponsor, we want to offer esports. And I said, okay, I don't know anything about it, but I'm in, right? I thought that, we'd had a lot of conversations about it. They were excited about it. The thing, Justin, I told them was if we were going to do it, we were going to do it just like any of our other traditional sports. We weren't going to have a weekend League of Legends tournament and say we sponsored esports. We were going to do it like we did women's soccer, like we did baseball, like we did men's basketball, anything like that. So, that's how it began. I was very fortunate to meet Caleb, who was ultimately started it with me. He was an intern actually at he was my first, sort of intern, and we built it together. He worked at, was working with one of the colleges that was a physical member of the athletic conference, and had played, in every league that was out there in the space, and really said, I think this is what they do well, and this is what I think we can do a little bit better. And I came about it with sort of the traditional athletic mindset of this is what we're going to try to do to improve upon things. And we had a lot of conversations. I can remember him, getting frustrated with my lack of knowledge at times because I really knew nothing about it. But really, what was really special about it, in building and developing, before we even launched, was the conversations with directors and with people around the space who are willing to open and willing to spend half an hour talking about it. And that's true to this day. So that's how I got into this world. I have imposter syndrome every day. If you told me I would make my living in college esports, I would have laughed at you 5 years ago. Yet here I am, trying to do this and build this community as best that I and certainly we at the NECC can.
Absolutely. So let's kind of talk about the National Esports Collegiate Conference. What is it, and how did it start? And some of the games and participating schools.
Yeah. So this is our fourth full year of competition. Basically, our eighth semester coming up here very shortly of play. It was originally going to be just the members of the Physical Athletic Conference, and then we talked about like, the competition is not going to be really good. It's not going to be really exciting for our players, right? They're going to know the hierarchy, and they're going to know like, all right, this team that's got scholarships and got funding, they're going to win everything, and the other schools can play, but it's not going to be a great experience. So pretty early on, there was support for expansion. I go back to a couple of conversations with schools. I always go back to conversation with the director at Cal State Dominguez Hills. That first semester, we were sort of blindly reaching out to folks and saying, "This is us. What do you think?" Ruben, it was Ruben at the time. Ruben's the best. And I remember saying like, this is our thing. And Ruben was like, we're in, but it's really hard to tell our people that we're in the New England Collegiate Conference, which is what it was at the time, the Physical Athletic Conference. So we rebranded, we became the NECC. We kept sort of the name. We went through pretty, extensive search for other titles and names. I recognized we had some sort of, I don't know, brand equity, brand awareness in the NECC. So we kept it. We changed the title. We changed the letters. We became certainly a separate entity just for, making sure things were clean on that side of things. And now, 4 years, fast forward 4 years later, we work with just about 450 colleges and universities throughout North America to varying degrees. Really proud to work with, the best of the best and Northwoods, Maryville's, you name it, of the world's, to the club programs, the University of Houston's, the places that are just building and, growing. University of Oklahoma that has a terrific academic focus and build and sees it through that lens. So, that's what we're really proud of. I think one of the good things, I think one of the challenging things has been that we've made a concerted effort just to not to have price point to be a barrier to entry. We want to work with clubs. We want to work with student orgs and help support them and help them grow and help them build. And that's been a focus since day one. Obviously, it's great to work with the bigger programs that have funding and that have buy-in from the college or the university. But for us to work with those student-led organizations that are really sort of that grassroots effort of like, hey, this is 10, 12, 25 kids on a campus that want to start an esports program and want to build and want to grow into, whether it be just approval or support from the institution all the way up to a varsity level program. That's been really cool to be a part of. So yeah, I mean, it's humbling to work with such a large footprint of members and try to support them as best we can. Ultimately, being a sort of the NECC being sort of a competition platform at our core, but ultimately wanting to make sure that they have support from us. They have everything that they need for success, growth, sustainability on their own campus.
Amazing. So it's like a league tournament organizer, and
Yeah.
we have hundreds of schools. What kind of games do you offer?
So we're going to be at 10 titles this coming semester. And what I mean by titles for us, we talk about our titles being games that we offer a full semester of competition, and we offer other games that sort of suit quote unquote tournament titles, where we'll offer Fortnite on a weekend or something along those lines. That's not a core title for us. Our most popular titles, not surprisingly in the space, Valorant, Rocket League, League of Legends, Call of Duty, CS2, stuff like that. But then we're really proud to, offer like an R6 because it's a niche community, but it's a good community for us. We also offer Overwatch, certainly. We have a great Halo community as well. And it's really been cool to be a part of. I think that, some of our success in growth has been offering titles at that level. And what I mean by that is that any title that we offer, we're going to make sure there's game managers for. We're going to make sure there's staffing for. We're going to make sure that there's a streaming element for and things along those lines, or else we're not going to do it. And obviously, I know we're going to probably get into it in a little bit, but working with the publisher, working with the developer to make sure that we have the proper permissions to offer it and sponsor it, at a level that they're comfortable with as well. So that's obviously central to everything that we do.
Definitely. I think that's kind of like lead to the perfect point where it kind of, obviously, as you mentioned, and we've touched on this many times in the show, that the game publisher, developers, the creator and owner of the game kind of really sits in this position to dictate all the commercial usages.
Yeah.
So you as a commercial platform offering prize money, getting sponsors, you fit right into their parameters. So how does it work where you're working with game developers and publishers? Is it, I know that certain games like, Riot Games, they have this whole scholastic association that really kind of dictates things. So, how does it work with games like that and then some other titles?
Yeah, I think for us, it's been obviously central to make sure that we have the proper permissions and the proper support. We wouldn't do it otherwise. Now, certainly, some titles have community guidelines that are published and you can offer and sponsor. Now, Riot, for example, being the publisher of two of our key titles in Valorant and League of Legends, they've been terrific to work with. I think originally, quite frankly, that was a big concern of mine of like, well, what if they pull the plug, right? What if they see us and they're like, oh no, this isn't good. Now I think they've seen our footprint. They've seen that we have so many teams. They've seen that we have so many players. And now they're like, hey, this is a good thing to be a part of. So that discussion has been a good one. And to their credit, quite frankly, again, not coming from this world, when we started, all I heard was, oh, Riot's tough to deal with. Riot's tough to deal with. They've been nothing short of fantastic for us to deal with. And since day one, which kudos to them. But ultimately to answer sort of the bigger question of like, what does that look like? Ultimately it's just sort of us reaching out and saying, hey, this is who we are. This is what we're about, and we're going to work within your parameters, within your guidelines. We're never going to be sketchy. We're never going to, we're never going to do anything that you're not comfortable with, and we're never going to do anything untoward. You tell us what you want us to do, and we'll make that work. Right? I think where I come from, the traditional athletic world, nobody owns basketball, nobody owns soccer, that type of stuff. Somebody does own Rocket League, so that's the reality of it. So making sure you have the permission for that, that intellectual property and to work with them is certainly central to everything that we do. Um, and by and large, Justin, I think it's been a really good relationship. I think that to the publisher's credit, I think they've seen the growth of collegiate. They've seen the growth of play within that younger demographic, obviously going all the way down to 10, 12, 15-year-olds that are playing in high school, knowing that this is the next wave of players that they want to attract and have play their titles. So it's been, by and large, those relationships have been really good. Blizzard's been unbelievable to work with, all those things, really supportive. And those conversations, by and large, knock on wood, I guess, have been really, really terrific. And their support has been massively appreciated.
So do you see some developers maybe being a little more eager and reaching out and trying to establish you, as a title within your league?
Yeah, and we've actually seen that shift because of our growth. I think originally it was permission and okay, cool, do these things, and this is what you have permission to do, and this is what you don't. Now it's a little bit more like, hey, will you or could you? We've worked more closely with some of the publishers as we've grown. Listen, they want people playing their title, understandably so. This is a community that if they're not playing Valorant, they're going to play something else. They're not playing CS2, they're going to play something else. It's not like they play X or that's it. I'm not going to play games. So there's a certain inherent interest from the publishers to make sure that our community of nearly 20,000 collegiate players is competing and playing. So yes, it's gotten better. At the same time, you start to see some of the conversations that are going on and outsourcing and things like that, and you wonder, all right, what does the future hold? We don't hold our breath about that right now, but ultimately, right, tomorrow could say, hey, we're doing our own thing, and we're gonna hamstring what you're able to do, what you're able to offer. Obviously, we hope that never happens. We hope to continue to be a great partner with them, but that's certainly a possibility, and we'll adjust accordingly should that day ever come. And hopefully, it never does. But certainly, our growth, I think, has been instrumental in terms of getting their support.
Right. I think that's always the underlying conversation. All of this. It's like, what if all of a sudden they're Riot's ready to work on League of Legends too? It's like, okay, well, we're taking League of Legends down because we're not working on it anymore. And it's like, okay, well, that's that, right? If there's no more League of Legends because the server's down because they're working on League of Legends too, well, that's a business decision. So,
And we've run
I
into that. We've run into that with Overwatch specifically when they took Overwatch down and went to Overwatch 2. It was right in the middle of our semester. So what were we going to do? We didn't, they're not building their calendar based on the academic calendar, whatsoever. So we had an abbreviated, fall that semester of Overwatch 2. And it was because it was being released at certain, timelines, and certain people were getting access to it sort of in waves and the like. So that's a challenge, no doubt. But I think that ultimately we've shown, I would hope we've shown we're doing everything by the letter of the law. We're not going to do anything that they're not comfortable with regards to brand guidelines, streaming assets, efforts, etc. And we'll always continue to do so. That's a non-negotiable from our side.
do they kind of, I'm familiar with the guidelines for the events, but do they have more personnel guidelines and conduct for the participants? Because I think that's probably one of the things that might not necessarily be within your control sometimes is, what happens when the show is live and you have five college kids against others and passions fly.
Yeah, and we've really focused on that since day one with regards to our streaming aspect. One of the things when we built this effort, Justin, was really I had a lot of conversations with deans and presidents and VPs and administrators who knew less than I did about esports, and I knew nothing, right? I mean, that's the reality of the situation of where it was. So the first thing we did when we created the NECC was really create a code of conduct and a guideline structure similar to what traditional college sports have, right? They have a rule book, they have a manual where it says these behaviors are not okay, whether it be this is a foul in soccer, this is a foul in softball, something like that, or something that's not allowed. We created that for each of our titles and what was allowed and what wasn't. So those were that was really instrumental. to having those conversations when people were like, I don't really understand this. We're like, no, it's okay. Like, you trust your soccer team to go out onto the field with 3 officials or 2 officials who you've never met, but you know that should something happen, they're going to manage the situation properly. And we did the same thing. We have game managers, we have interns, we have people that are monitoring our Twitch chat and our stream whenever we're live to make sure that anything that is untoward is not okay. And one of the first things, I'll always remember, I had a dean reach out to me from one of our members our first semester, and they were like, first of all, this is great. And they're like, second of all, I really appreciate the fact that I could watch the stream and didn't have to worry about the language or anything that came up, because I've watched so much of this stuff where it is not okay. And the stuff I've seen is, it would make you cringe. And he said, I never saw that from you guys. And that was a massive compliment for us. And I think stuff like that, we have a really strict code of conduct policy. We have a 2-strike policy. There's no place for that in what we do in our community. We'd rather, quite frankly, we'd rather not work with you than have that behavior, that that language, et cetera, happen within the NECC.
So what benefits do publishers have with maybe working with, organizer on a much higher level where you can be more involved? I know Omega Strikers, their developer, really took hold on the college scene and, got teams involved and had in-game skins and, catered to them a little bit more than some traditional ones. Do you see that as a trend? What are the benefits there?
I think we've seen more of that, in terms of the support for the space, in terms of what's happening. Again, I think collegiate still relatively in its infancy, but it's getting more so, right? It's getting more mature in everything across the board. And what I mean by that is, it's not just, this is a collection of kids on a campus. Right now they have a coach. Now they have a LAN center. They have a place to play on campus, whether it be a classroom or whatever it may be, that's devoted to their competition and their collecting and coming together. So I think that in terms of those benefits, I think it is, obviously, at the end of the day, they want people playing their titles. So in working with us, there's an appeal of, hey, they've got this footprint of schools that they work with. Why not get our title? We've had, quite frankly, we've had smaller titles reach out to us pretty consistently and say, how do we work together? Which is cool. But for us, we want to make sure that we can staff it properly. We want to make sure that we can sponsor it in a way that we're comfortable with regards to management, regards to structure, regards to staff. So that's a challenge, but it is cool for them to reach out and say, hey, what do you think about offering X title? What do you think about offering this next semester? Because we see what you guys are doing.
Definitely see that as a trend. I know they're, especially with some game genres as, CSGO and some of these more realistic, graphic, violent games, they're not exactly, let's just say, university, college, scholastic friendly. And,
yep.
Then you have some of the sports titles that maybe are a little bit more friendly, but they don't have the same viewership and interest. So is that kind of, how do you navigate that?
Yeah, we've it's a good question. Obviously, we've from our side, we've sort of treated like traditional sports in many ways. Like, some schools offer women's lacrosse, some schools offer men's lacrosse, some don't. And that's a choice for campuses. For us, we're going to poll our community, just our process in terms of what they'd like to see us offer, and then we're going to go about getting the proper permissions, and hopefully those two things sync and align. We're not going to offer. Most likely, we're not going to offer a small title where there's only 6 or 8 teams, because it's not going to lead to a great competition. It's not going to lead to a great experience. So in terms of the real world, the real world, the more violent titles, for us, I have a lot of conversations with directors and university people who are like, we're not comfortable. I'm like, that's fine. You don't have to, right? Play Rocket League, play things that are you're more comfortable with, and things like that. For us, we've tried to stay away from, quite frankly, the single player titles, which typically tend to be the sports games. Funny note, our first semester, we offered Madden, and it was Monday. It was our first night going live. It was our first night of, this is the NECC, and it was 1v1 Madden, and our first stream was a forfeit because one kid didn't show up. And here we are, we're off and running. And our first night, we're like, rah, this is great. 6:00 Eastern, here we go. And a kid doesn't show up. So for us, it's central to have sort of that roster. We ask every team to have at least one sub, so that if you don't have a player show up, that game will still go on. Again, we sort of treat it like traditional athletics. Like if your best player goes down in basketball, you don't call up your next four opponents and say, hey, my best scorer sprained his ankle. Can we not play for the next 2 weeks? Somebody steps in, right? And that game goes on. That's how we've treated it. We've run into this a lot certainly during COVID, with things happening in moving pieces. Now, not to say we didn't say, oh, well, tough luck. You can certainly reschedule and work with you on that. But we didn't want it to be, oh, this kid can't play, we can't play the game. That game's going to go on. And that's been important to us. So, that's how we've handled it. So as a result, we've typically not done single player games, as opposed to in that tournament model, not really our core title type structure.
I mean, that makes sense, because ultimately you want them to take, students and participants to take this like any other sport, where like a game is precedent. Like when I was playing high school and lacrosse, it was like, don't make vacation like during the season. Like you're for the season, like this is your commitment other than classes, right? It's like, as a student, you do your homework and your tests, and you are an athlete, and that is your commitment here.
We've worked with, we say a lot, exactly what you just outlined. We when we entered the space, we wanted to treat this like traditional athletics, exactly all that framework that you're mentioning and you're alluding to. We wanted to say, listen, if you want to compete in this league, these are the things we expect of you. Forfeits aren't allowed, right? We things are going to happen, but that's not okay. And we have a strict policy. We put some things in place to make sure that hopefully that doesn't happen with things that we do on our side with our game managers and our staff. But ultimately, we don't want that. Exactly, like we create a semester-long schedule. We expect out of those 7 weeks of regular season play, you're going to be there for those 7 games. It's not going to be forfeit central. It's not going to be, oh, I know that game was supposed to start at 7:00, but I'm going to ping their manager at 7:01 and say, can we play at 9:00? No, that's not how it works. The other thing that's been massive for us, and again, this comes from my background, I think in traditional athletics, was we created a divisional structure. And what we meant by that was we weren't going to pick two names out of a hat and say, go play this game and hope it's a good game. Like the likelihood of that was very small. So we tried to pair teams of what we call equal compete level against one another, and they play, within their own division. Now it's certainly far from perfect, but we do the best job we can with regards to pairing those teams that are similar in terms of where they are. And it could be scholarship versus non-scholarship. That's, not a factor at this point, but where they belong. And I think that helps. Well, I know that helps lead to lower forfeit rate, because at the end of the day, if you're playing a better game, you're more likely to show up than, oh, I'm going to get my door stomped in again. This isn't fun. I'm not going to do it. So that's where that sort of, I guess, my background in Division II, Division III athletics primarily came in. Like Division III basketball teams would love to go down and play at Duke or North Carolina or Florida, Ohio State. They'd get their doors blown in. And it'd be a cool experience for them to go down and see those campuses or have that experience, but it wouldn't be a great use of time or resources or anything like that. So we tried to get away from that. Again, it's far from perfect, but it's an effort, and I think as a result, we've seen people take it more seriously because we are holding them accountable. It's very funny. One of the things we talk a lot about when people say, "Can I reschedule a game?" We have a 7-day reschedule policy. When somebody says, "Can we reschedule a game?" we say, "Well, is it within 7 days?" And they say no, and you say, "Well, no," and it's amazing. All of a sudden, they're able to play that game.
Right.
How that
Right.
happens,
Isn't that how that happens?
as opposed to if we said, yeah, you can reschedule it. So when you say no, you can't because you're not within that, where you're outside that window or whatever. More often than not, that game gets played, and you find a sub, you find somebody that can stand in and you play, as opposed to taking a forfeit.
Right. And I think that's kind of the difference that you start to see when you're taking this seriously. And as you mentioned, you're having this more skill-based competition, which I think makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think for us, quite frankly, I was, again, total outsider in the space, 4 or 5 years ago. I was really blown away by the fact that it wasn't pretty consistent, just because that's all I had known from my work in Division I, II, III athletics to varying degrees. So it's definitely not foolproof. It's not as clean. We've tried to do it with different activation tournaments, which are scrim series is basically. We've seen schools take those seriously. We've seen some schools not take them seriously, and how that's affected what we do and how much stock should we put into those things and things like that. So it's it's a work in progress, certainly. But we've also been able to take, certainly the API integration we get, and have a ballpark of where people belong. And I think the other thing I'm proud of is the fact that, while it hasn't been perfect, every team has been sort of treated individually, and it hasn't just been, oh, well, this is their top ranked player, they go here, right? No, it's, hey, this is where that player is, this is where their second player, this is blah blah blah, and this is where they fit. So that's been good. Again, it's far from perfect. We have more success with it, Justin, from the programs that are with us year in and year out, because we sort of get a feel for where they belong. They're very honest with us about, hey, I think we're pretty good this year, or hey, we might be a little bit down, something like that. That honesty helps. And the other funny thing that I share with a lot of people about this is, originally everybody wanted to play against the best, right? So they would overshoot. They would say, we're awesome, right? We're great. We're going to be up here. And they would struggle. And that's, that's the nature of the beast, right? You want to play against the Northwoods, the Maryvilles, the World, those powerhouse programs. Now all of a sudden we have some prize money, we have some prizing at the end of the semester, and now it's the other way. Schools are trying to, I don't want to say sandbag, but they're pretty content being in our fourth or fifth division because they know they can win a couple $1,000s at the end of the year or whatever, as opposed to if they're in that second or third division where they're not. So seeing that shift in a short window of time has been funny.
Awesome. Yeah. So, I know you kind of mentioned you started more in the traditional collegiate sports world, now moved over into the esports world. So, what similarities have you seen between the two areas? And then what are some differences you've noticed?
It's a great question. Listen, at the end of the day, again, coming from Division II, Division III athletics, none of those programs make a dollar in terms of money out versus money in on their respective campuses. Now, every single Division II, Division III athletic program, they sponsor college athletics because they know what it means to the institution. And what I mean by that is they know it means for retention, enrollment purposes, alumni giving, and getting people on your campus, things like that, to see a basketball game or a soccer game or whatever. Esports is no different. This is a retention enrollment tool. The schools that have done it well that we've seen, they've set it up in many ways like a traditional athletic department, and they've built it accordingly. And that's been awesome to see. Some of them, I go back to the University of Oklahoma and what they're doing at Syracuse University now. They're building it through the academic lens, and that the competition is very much secondary. That's a wonderful model. I really believe that, listen, it's something like 90% of all high school kids are playing a game every night, regardless of gender. So this is the demographic. There is no better way to get your university, your college seen by that demographic you're trying to recruit to your institution than by offering esports. Now, ultimately, how you do it is going to differ. Is it through the competitive lens? Is it through the educational model? Whatever. So I think that's where the similarities are between traditional, and non-traditional in terms of esports. What's different is certainly the model that 99% of the competition is virtual. Right? When you play basketball, you're going to another school, you're going to another gym, you are playing that opponent physically. 99% of our competition is virtual. There's a handful of select tournaments and championship events that are in person. But that is different. So that leads to challenges, that leads to issues. And we're trying to work on those. We're trying to make that a better experience. Ultimately, traditional college athletics has a massive and a really, really good compliance system. The NCAA, for all its warts, they do a very good job of regulating. Now, you can argue the merits of that, and what that's defined as, but they do a very good job of saying, hey, this person is academically eligible, and they've taken the courses and what they need to do for their credit hours, et cetera, and they are eligible. That's an awesome way to navigate, and we're efforting towards that. We're not there yet. Right now, it's very much we do some checks at the end of the semester before our national championship effort. But we need to do a better job of verifying that and vetting that to say, hey, this student athlete is academically eligible to compete in League of Legends in the NECC in the spring of 2024, just like a clearinghouse would do for a baseball student athlete or a softball student athlete in the spring of 2024. And those are some of the differences right now. And again, it's going to happen with the maturing of the space. It's going to happen with the growth and development, certainly the resources being put forth. But we've seen a massive influx in the number of colleges and universities that sponsor or offer esports to whatever degree. And now it's just a matter of sort of maturing and growing up accordingly.
Definitely. So I know you mentioned the NCAA. Do I know we kind of talk a little bit about their current stance on esports and kind of where they feel about this. Do you envision it being something that's going to happen, that you're going to be dealing with them, or that you're kind of an alternative to it, or what does that look like?
I think we talk a lot about that, and obviously it's a question that's come up before. I think ultimately the NCAA right now has a lot of issues they're dealing with. We all know.
Yes, they're in the court. They're in courtrooms
Yeah,
nearly every week now.
yeah, yeah. There's a lot of litigation going on. They're trying to keep their house in order. I don't think at this point their bandwidth includes opening up for esports and what that means. Ultimately, I don't know. I think what we've seen is an influx of conferences sponsoring it at that level, right? And traditional athletic conferences. We see more and more of those. Um, I guess ultimately someday something along those lines will happen. In the meantime, I don't think it's imminent. I think they're working with the massive issues in terms of realignment and NIL and our student athletes, technically workers and what does that
Employee
about,
relations.
all that stuff. So I think maybe if this was 25, 30 years ago where their house was in order and everything was sort of lined up, they'd say, all right, let's take a look at esports. What does that look like? We know it's happening. We know our membership, and they're a membership driven organization, just like we are. Our membership is offering it. How do we support it? Right now, I don't think they have the bandwidth to do it. Again, I come back to while they're, they've run into some issues, certainly, because of what's happened in the space of traditional college athletics. What I would like to see us do a better job of is that compliance model, making sure that regulation of things is, what it can be, and making sure that the players that compete with us are eligible to do so. And right now we have certain standards, but ultimately, we need to do a better job of making sure that when somebody logs in and competes as so and so, they are who they say they are, and they're academically eligible, and they're full time enrolled, and all the things that we ask of our community to be able to compete with us.
Right. And I think that's probably one of the harder points, is
Yeah.
because everything's digitally. It's like you could say that the guy is there, unless there's a camera on him the whole time. You don't really know.
And that's part of the issue is, I mean, listen, the privacy issue of cameras. There are some schools that won't allow their competitors to have cameras on. And obviously, you respect and understand that from a privacy issue. So yeah, it's challenging. We're working on it internally through varying, channels. But I think the future will be better in that area. I know it'll be from our side. As we go about it, it's certainly a focus for us to make sure that, listen, when Valparaiso logs in to play Murray State, those 5 players that are playing VanRyn on a Monday night are who they say they are, and they're academically eligible, and vice versa. And they're not logging into somebody else or using credentials or blah 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 whatever. That's impossible in traditional athletics, right? You go on a soccer field. Hey, I can look across the field. That's Susie Smith. I know Susie Smith. I can see her. That's who she is. That's not the case in VanRyn on a Monday night within the NECC right now.
And I guess, like, who would that be on? Because obviously with the NCAA, you kind of have these obligations as a university to police this stuff and to self-report. And if you know about things and you don't, it's way worse than if you just find out, right? It's like all these institutional things. Whereas a member, you have to police your own. And if it happens under your watch and you don't know about it and you don't do anything about it once you know, it's problematic. Is that how this goes, or what do you
Yeah,
think?
and we have an eligibility committee. We have a lot of committees that we work with to ensure as best we can. Ultimately, I will say this: our directors, by and large, while massively taxed, massively understaffed, again, sort of broad stereotype there. There are some that have good support, but they could certainly use more. I think they do a really good job, and I think they self police pretty well. And I would say this: I think the stereotype is that some of the student run clubs are like the wild wild west, and that old sort of mantra or whatever, that old term that gets thrown around a lot. Some of our student clubs are some of the best we work with in terms of managing and policing their own. So I don't feel comfortable saying, oh, well, it's the student run clubs that are all the problems. That's not the case. So I think by and large, our people, I hear from directors all the time say, hey, listen, this person is, we have a waiver process where you can apply if you don't meet our minimum standards to be to compete for whatever reason. We ran into this a lot, Justin, during COVID, where people were taking a semester off, or they were helping out with mom and dad or grandma and grandpa at home, and they weren't full-time, right? They were taking 2 classes instead of 4 because of the challenges and things like that, or they had to get a part-time job or whatever it may be, or another job or whatever. We try to be inclusive as opposed to exclusive. And I think that our people do a really good job of being pretty transparent. I've had a number of conversations with people where they're like, listen, this kid comes from a tough spot. He's a 195. He's not a 2.0. But esports is his life. It's his life bond. It's his connection to this university. And without this, he's probably going to drop out. How do we work with them, and how do we support them? And it's like, hey, if we can support that student athlete, we can support that, that player, and they can have a better experience. They can feel more tied, and they be a little bit more motivated to succeed in school. Then that's a win, right? I think that's the reality of it. At the end of the day, nobody in our world is making millions of dollars. Nobody is. It's not that that competitive imbalance. So if we can support our community, and our competitors, and provide them with that experience, and again, this is their. It's no different than a team, a traditional team. This is their team. This is what they identify as. This is I play VanRyn, at Murray State. I play VanRyn at wherever, Florida Gulf Coast, and it's important to me, and that's awesome. We want that. So if we can support that and provide that, and at the same time regulate it slightly better, so that, hey, I know, even though I'm virtual, even though I'm on the screen, the 5 players, the 6 players that we have in our lobby or whatever are who they say they are, and this is a good competition, and may the better team win, then that's our goal.
Amazing. Well, this is great. So it's kind of flip the other side of the coin where, I know, as you mentioned, some certain schools are really kind of building academics and having that as part of their offerings. Is there any kind of classes that you think are valuable, or one that you think need to be kind of offered more?
What's interesting about this space, and the number of conversations I've had is, obviously this is a community that is interested in typically, science-based efforts, whatever that may be, and very catch-all type term. What we've seen and what we've heard is there's a lot of people that want to support and want to provide for their students and offer esports, intro to esports, casting, production, et cetera, game development and the like. But there's not a doctorate in esports. You don't have a doctorate in econ and math and poli-sci or whatever. That doesn't exist. So what you're seeing is a lot of professors really jump in and say, hey, I know there's a need, I know there's a want for this on our respective campus. I don't know the first thing about it, but I'm going to support my students, and I want to provide that for them. So what do? Basic structure stuff, develop and build a tournament, we have a semester long capstone, program where at the end of the semester, we're going to host a Rocket League tournament on campus. And that's the task of our class this semester, things like that. I go back to, the University of Oklahoma, where they have a community of 3,000, and they have a journalism program there, which is terrific. And they use, games or competitions with esports to write them up like a traditional football game at Oklahoma or whatever it may be, and get those opportunities and get those professional development, chances and growth. And, the competition is sort of an afterthought, not to say they aren't terrific, but it's not the focus. I think that is sort of the future of what's going to happen here. I think more and more schools are building curriculum, and they're building opportunities and minors and majors and internship programs similar to business structure, right? You get an internship at, Deloitte and Touche. Well, now you get an internship with the NECC, right? That's the path you want to go into, and get that experience, get that professional growth opportunity. So we're seeing it. And again, ultimately, it's providing that opportunity for that community that's interested in this path, because they do it and they're passionate about it. And how do we now support them just like we would anything else, any other sort of traditional path of study that they would go into?
Definitely. I know, as someone who's very involved in teaching this stuff and building curriculum for these schools, it's definitely a conversation that's happening more and more, and you're starting to see this trend with Syracuse, and obviously we've had both Mike and Joey on previously, so we know all the great stuff that they've been working on in this space. So it's really exciting to see where it goes. So
it's cool. It's
kind of
really
wanted.
special. Yeah, it's really special, and I think that ultimately, if this is going to continue to grow and succeed, which I think it is, it has to have buy-in at that level.
Right. So we definitely seeing that trend. So I'm excited to see where that goes. So additionally, as you mentioned, you're having top players from maybe high school or former pros being, transitioning to the collegiate space. How does this work? Do you see this as being a trend that's going to continue?
I think that certainly we'll see more and more of this legitimizing factor. I really do. I think that the pro circuit is having their own issues in professional esports. Those contracts, those dollars are drying up to some degree for a variety of reasons, and we're seeing more and more former pro players come back and get their opportunity and compete and get a degree for their next step in life. It's no different than guy who played in the NBA and was drafted in their freshman year. After their freshman year, they play for 4 or 5 years, and they come back to school and they get their degree. I think that's terrific. In terms of the high school scene, for the thing that we've talked about is making sure that we have the proper mechanisms and support structure in place, because now these programs have come online and they're being offered, and they've popped up, quite frankly, and now their goal is, hey, you've got to enroll 50 students every other year to be a part of your esports program. Well, how do you do that, right? How do you provide them? There's no, there's AAU tournaments every weekend in the spring for basketball. There's lacrosse showcases. There's soccer jamborees and things like that. There's softball showcases that go on every weekend in this country. We know that the youth sports scene that exists, and a college coach in those teams can go and watch 200 players, over the course of a Saturday afternoon and say, that player's really good. That player's really good, whatnot. I'd like to talk to them. I want to recruit them. I want to introduce myself and say, hey, have you ever thought about playing soccer here or whatever? We need to continue to support that for our college programs. And how do we do that? How do we make that pipeline cleaner? How do we make it so that, all right, I'm a director and I'm located here. How do I get my eyes on? How do I get to meet 250 players within a 200-mile radius? Because we know that most, students, attend college within, about 100-mile radius of where they grew up. How do we provide those tools? How do we allow them and set them up for sustained success and growth ultimately? Right now, it's sitting in chat rooms and watching streams on Twitch and things like that. And it's like, hey, I'm so-and-so from X university. And the kid's like, no, you're not. This is my friend. You're pulling my chain. The guy's like, no, I really want to talk to you. You're awesome. What can I tell you about my university? Can I tell you about my program? So how do we do a better job of that? There are certainly some great organizations out there that do that, but can we continue to connect the dots? Can we continue to make that transition a little bit more seamless? Can we educate young players and their families and say, hey, you play Rocket League and you're a scholarship level player. These are schools within your footprint that you're interested in, or that you want to go to play. You want to go to school in California. These are the 25 schools that offer scholarship dollars for their Rocket League program in California. And they offer econ, and you're interested in studying econ as a path and as your major. So I think that's important to us going forward. Just making sure people know what's out there. It's an educational tool, certainly for mom and dad. When you can say, and we've seen this since we've been around, mom and dad, when there's $15,000-$20,000 off the cost of admittance or the cost of tuition every year because they're playing a game, now all of a sudden they're a little bit more supportive, right? It's not a waste of time. All of a sudden, holy cow, this is awesome, right? This is great. So I think we're seeing that. I know we're seeing it. We're seeing the arms race in some ways with regards to facilities being built and schools sponsoring at different levels. But we need to continue to support certainly the directors within the NECC, the coaches, the leaders within the NECC with those abilities so that they can continue to recruit and attract talent to their respective institutions throughout North America.
Definitely. I definitely think that's kind of the trend that needs to happen is
Yeah.
you have some local state organizations that maybe have some larger events, but not at the level that traditional sports have where, you have to really seek them out, whether it's through Discord on the leaderboard. It's just not as feasible as the top 1,000 VanRyn players from the country descend upon, this camp, and you have all the different, directors come and watch them, and they just play for hours, and you just see how they work with different players and all this other stuff.
It's been an interesting process to work with, and I think that we've seen a lot more schools offer camps and developments and similar to like a basketball camp during the summer, whatever, right? Or a swimming camp. We've seen that. That's a recruiting tool for the institution. All of a sudden, Steve or Sally gets on that campus. They're like, this is gorgeous. I love it here. I want to come here, right? Even if they're 12, 13 years old, it's in the back of their mind. I had a great experience there. And it just has that positive association. We're seeing more and more of that with esport opportunities during the summer and summer camps and professional development, just exactly what we talked about. How do you respond? How do you interact with others? Are you just awesome, or can you be a part of a team? Can you be a good teammate? Can you be a good leader? Can you communicate well? Or when things go sideways, do you slam the headset down and you lose your mind
And
and you
start
rage?
yelling at everyone. And
Exactly. So that's important. And again, we're seeing that, and we want to help facilitate that. We want to help our programs grow in that way. And that, that's a charge for us going forward.
amazing. So we're kind of moving this a little forward. So congratulations on winning the 2023 Tournament Organizer of the Year at the Scholar Awards, which is operated by the Esports Awards. So it was like attending the event and then winning. Were you guys surprised?
First of all, it's a tremendous honor. Again, I don't use this sort of imposter thing, this imposter syndrome lightly. I mean, we have the utmost respect for every other organization that's out there. We know the work that it takes to do this at a good level on a daily basis. Our staff works way more than they should because they care about putting out a good product. They care about our community. They want people to have a good experience when they compete in NECC. The reason that made the Scholars probably more impactful, Justin, or more meaningful is because it was voted on by the community, right? It wasn't one person saying, "Oh, they won, whatever." That really means a lot. Obviously, to be there, I thought they did an outstanding job. I thought the event was spectacular. I again, what legwork goes into producing something like that, putting all that together. It was not a small undertaking, and they were personally terrific to me, terrific to our team in terms of saying, "Hey, we'd love to have you. You've been nominated." They wanted that legitimacy, right? They wanted to have all the nominees in the room. We didn't know. We were hopeful, but we didn't know. We were in categories with unbelievable, organizations and communities that were really well, mature and well thought out and well planned and had been around longer than we had. And to be able to win. I know it meant a ton to our staff, and I'm really, really happy about that because they're the ones that spend the hours and making sure that our community has as good an experience as they possibly can.
Amazing. Yeah, it looked like a great time, and congratulations and
Thank you.
congrats to all the nominees. I know, like you said, it's tough and everyone deserves to win. So it's always probably nice to walk away with that trophy and, feel a little
So,
vindication for the work. And like you said, the staff puts in all this time.
yeah, and that's what I felt. I mean, I felt awesome. I mean, this has been a passion project for our team. I mean, and I said it after we won. Nobody in our world is getting rich doing what we're doing. Nobody. So you've got to love
Not
it.
yet.
We've got to love it. Yeah, of course. I mean, fingers are crossed, right? But you've got to love it. And if I say this a lot, if you saw what our staff, myself included, made, you would laugh. You'd be like, go to Walmart. You can make more money working for $15 an hour over there. And that's the reality of the situation where we are. But it's because of that passion, that commitment, that love for what they're doing. Our staff is. I can't speak highly enough about them for the amount of hours they put in, the effort that they put forth on a daily basis, troubleshooting, dealing with, oh my God, this isn't happening. Oh my God, this has happened. Oh my God, power outage. Oh my God, stream's gone down. Oh my God, somebody didn't show up. That type of stuff.
Disconnect.
Yeah, of course. I felt so good for them, and I know that we're being nominated. It's so cliche, but just being nominated amongst those other organizations was truly an honor, and to be in that room, to hear people speak about what it meant, and all the deserving winners and all the deserving non-winners. Quite frankly, everybody who was nominated deserved an award. But to hear what it meant, and to just see that sort of community come together, was really pretty special.
Amazing. So definitely, if you haven't checked it out, try to get to the award shows. They always put on a great um, presentation there. So
Did a good
have a
job.
good time. So what's some advice you have for anyone looking to work in the esports and video gaming space?
I think you've got to love it. There's going to be a lot of hours. There's not going to be a ton of pay, as you said. Hopefully, there is someday, and that's the thing I tell our staff a lot. Is that it's got to be a passion play. The thing that I'm proud of, I guess, in terms of this is I'm the CEO, commissioner, whatever, blah, blah, blah title. Our interns, and I say this to interns when they apply, like, you're going to know more about this than I am day one. Whether you are last person in the door in terms of an internship, whatever, you have lived this your whole life. So there is no, hey, I'm overstepping because I'm an intern. You bring to the table what you bring to the table. And I think that's what's really pretty special about this time in collegiate esports, is the opportunity for people to choose their own path and fail. And we talk a lot about that. One of the things that we say all the time is, we're better today than we were yesterday. Like, if I cringe and when I think back about what we looked like 4 years ago, but I know we're going to be way better 4 years from now than we are today. We're going to look back at this time and say, oh my God, what a disaster we were. That's where we are, right? So when people are entering this space, thinking about this as a career, it's not going to be lucrative to start. That's for sure. I would share that. But at the same time, I think there's great opportunity to choose your own course and find your path. And say, man, I really didn't know, but I love casting. I love producing. I love whatever it may be, the social component. I love, that side of TOing or, running events and things like that. But ultimately, you've got to love it, because the hours are going to be long. It's going to be challenging, but hopefully, if you love it, it doesn't feel like work, and you're getting to have that experience. You're going to have that opportunity. And the final thing I would say is that, and the reason I'm so humbled and consider myself so lucky to do what I do, is it's such a warm, inclusive community. It's awesome. I worked in traditional athletics where people would call and yell about an official's call, or how could you do this, or how could this schedule be like this. We'll probably get there in esports at some point in collegiate. I expect it, but right now it's a lot of thank yous. It's a lot of, you've made this better, and that's pretty meaningful. But more than that, this is a community of people at the director level, at the staffing level, that cares about the competitors more than anything. They want those 18 to 24-year-olds to have as good an experience as they possibly can at their institution. And they're going to do anything in their power. If it means staying until 1 o'clock in the morning because they want to watch that game, or if they want to, give that kid a hug because they got an A on a paper or got a B plus on a test, whatever it may be, that's where this space is right now. And that's really, really meaningful. And I think that's the narrative that needs to be told. Is the stereotype out there is like wild, wild west and blah, blah, blah. Couldn't be further from the truth. It's a warm, welcoming, inclusive, supportive community that's really, really awesome to be part of. And I know you're not going to get rich tomorrow, but if you can choose it and make it your career, it's a very rewarding one.
Definitely. I think that's some amazing advice. And yeah, it's definitely one of these grinds where the grind is not as enjoyable. It doesn't make it so tough.
Yeah, obviously, when you're passionate about something, you're working a 12-hour day. It's a lot easier than digging a ditch and you're counting down the minutes, right? I mean, that's the reality of it. And I think that's what that's what we talk a lot about, is that, like, yeah, the days are going to be long, and it's going to be challenging, and it's going to be frustrating, and there's going to be people that are going to be mad at your decision or your ruling or your blah blah blah, whatever it may be. But they're doing it because they're passionate about it, and you're doing it because you're passionate about it, because you love it. And if you can see that sort of, and I struggle with this myself, if you can see that sort of, that forest through the trees, you can sort of step back and say, what we're doing here is really special, and I want to be a part of it. Then it becomes that much more rewarding in terms of a day-to-day opportunity and a day-to-day thing, as opposed to, oh my God, tonight's going to be a grind. Oh my God, what fire is going to happen tonight? What am I going to have to put out? Blah, 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 that type of thing.
Amazing. So we'll kind of like bring this towards the end. What's the future for the NECC and for college esports in particular?
Oh man, if I knew that, I'd probably have a better grasp on everything. I think the future is certainly maturing of the space. For us, um, I I want our competition to be as good as it can be. Obviously, we're at our core, we're a competition platform, but ultimately, I want to support our members so that when they compete with us, they have access to other things, whether it be educational development opportunities, whether it be recruitment, retention tools, things like that. Um, in terms of what the future holds, I don't, I know it's not going away. So we need to ensure, we need to put things in place so that it can succeed and it can continue to grow and thrive and be the best it possibly can be. We talk a lot about, like, this is college sports 100 years ago, and I don't use that crassly. Like, we used to have football teams that would wear leather helmets and run into each other, right? And that was okay. We're figuring it out, and nobody's got all the answers. But I keep coming back to the fact that 99.9% of the people in the space are in it for the right reasons. They're in it for the kids that are playing, and they want to provide that experience for them. So how do we help structure that? How do we help support that? When a school works with us, how do we make sure that 2 years from now, they're meeting their goals of whether it be student enrollment, whether it be program growth, whether it be championships won, whatever their goal may be. And 4 years from now, they're hitting that goal, and 10 years from now, so that they can go back to their, whoever they answer to on their respective campus and say, look at this, we won this championship. Oh my God, we beat this institution, or, whatever it may be. Or, I brought 30 more kids to campus that we wouldn't have had if we didn't have a League of Legends team, or we didn't have a CS2 team, or whatever, that type of thing. So that continued growth and maturity, so that programs can thrive. And we've seen some fallout already, right? You've seen some schools that have just jumped in and they're not seeing the results. There's going to be more of that. So we have to make sure that we can support our programs, our membership, our schools the best possible way, so that 5, 10, 20 years from now, they're set up for sustained growth and success and excellence, whatever, Justin, that's defined as, whether it be competitive, academic, educational, or anything else.
Amazing. Well, definitely sounds like there's a lot going on. I'm very bullish on the space. I do believe that we'll be having, these kind of some semblance of it on most college campuses across the country. And, League of Legends, Ohio State, Michigan is going to be big a tailgate as the football is. Like I said, there's going to be everyone in cosplay and, talk about their favorite, characters, and then going in rooting on their team as they, battle up against each other.
No doubt. And I think that to that point, I think that everybody sort of wants that fast forward moment, right? It's not going to happen. It's not going to be overnight. It's not going to be a light switch, right? It's going to take years and years and years. And, we look at our numbers sometimes. We're like, why are we spending money on our stream when we get 50 concurrent viewers? Well, it's not that, right? It's the people watching the VODs. It's people watching on through our other distribution channels. Things like that is the reason we do it. But it's not going to be an overnight, right? I mean, listen, Ohio State, Michigan, they don't have 100,000 fans at that football game. That didn't happen because last year they started sponsoring football, right? That's 100 years of buildup and growth and the maturing of the space. Esports, by and large, at the collegiate level is about 10 years old, give or take. So I agree with you. Every school's going to do it. If you're not, I mean, again, I'm late to the party. I say a lot to folks, if you're not doing it, you're missing out on this massive sector of the population you're trying to recruit to your institution. So why would you miss out on that? Well, you want those high schoolers thinking about your school as a possible next step. So offer it, whatever degree, whatever, path you choose in terms of what you offer it through, or the level which you want to sponsor or support it. That's up to you. But I think if you don't do it, I think you're really missing out on an opportunity.
100%. So, there's a lot in there. So I really thank you so much for joining us. This was extremely insightful. So tell me where they can kind of connect and see what, you guys are working on and maybe to sign up.
Thank you. Justin, I appreciate the conversation. It's awesome to see your work and everything that you've done, and relying on you and your expertise for a number of things. Our site is necc.gg. Most of our socials are at NECC Games. Twitter, Instagram is our best sort of channels. Our Discord is, out there. Certainly can contact me, at any time of day. It's Jacob VanRyn everywhere, basically. So yeah, it's awesome. I'm proud to be a part of this community, even though I never thought I'd be here at 46 years old. But I wouldn't choose any other thing right now, and I want to continue to do this and support this unbelievable community for as long as I, and certainly us at the NECC, can.
Amazing. So everyone make sure to check it out. And if your school isn't part of it, definitely let them know they got some great.
We want you.
Exactly. Let them know there's some great stuff going on, great prizes, great competition. And, if you're not at superstar level right now, you'll play against people of your own level, which I think is really important, because, you don't want to go into a match, like you said, where it's just going to be a blowout. It's not going to be fun, and you're not going to want to do it, and it's going to get old really fast.
No doubt. And the thing, the final thing I'll say is, my background in traditional athletics, like, listen, Division III football crowns a national champion. Division II football crowns a national champion. Would they beat Georgia, Alabama? No, but it's darn meaningful to those student athletes, and it should be. And that's central to everything that we do. We're going to crown 5, 6, 7 national champions, depending on how many divisions we have. That will always be the case, because that's where they should be, and that's important to us.
Awesome. So thank you everybody again for tuning in, and make sure to follow me on Twitter, Justin JESQ, and check Apple Podcasts for all our past episodes, and check YouTube, as now we have all of our video episodes up.